I am finally giving you guys a tutorial on how I airbrush my blurry backgrounds. I'm Lisa, the artist behind Lachri Fine Art. Today I am going to be giving you guys a tutorial showing you exactly how I get the blurry backgrounds, which give them a more three-dimensional look. Now the painting that you see here is actually just my acrylic underpainting. I'm not finished at all working on the corgi or the flowers or any of that, but the background's mostly done, so next week will be the full video. Now I use my airbrush anytime I want that really soft, blurry, out of focus look, and people will ask me all the time, how do I get that look without the airbrush? Oils, you can do it if you're doing a lot of glazing, but with acrylics, if you're working in acrylic and you want that type of look, you really do need to get an airbrush. Acrylics just dry too fast, even with spraying water. It's just not the same as what you would get with the airbrush. Now I already have a video showing you guys the basic of airbrushing and the tools that I use, and I'll put a link in the video description and a little card note. So definitely check that out if you haven't watched it already and you want to see which tools that I'm using. The great thing about this is you don't have to be good at airbrushing at all to get this look. You can be a total beginner and still get something that looks like this, because you're not trying to get detail. You want to keep the airbrush fairly far away from the canvas or the paper, whichever you're working on, and avoid any harsh lines. I have detail as far as a lot of different shadows and different colors and everything like that, but the transition between each of these colors and shadows are very, very blurry. As long as you're keeping the airbrush a little bit away from the canvas, then you're going to get that look without even really trying. Before we get started, I'm going to give you a couple of tips to make this a lot easier if you are new to airbrushing. I use Createx paint. It is a pretty thick, opaque paint, and it can be frustrating because it's really easy to clog up your airbrush with that paint. So what I do is take a spray bottle and squirt a fair amount of water into my airbrush, and then I put a few drops of the paint. You want it to be about the consistency of milk, so thinning that paint out is a must on a lot of these airbrushes, especially if it has a smaller needle like this one. I think this is a 0.35, something like that. 0.5 needle, which is larger, isn't going to clog as badly, but if you thin out the paint, it's not so bad. The other thing you may want to do, there is a little cap that goes on the front of the airbrush. I don't know if you can see that. I have removed, and almost dropped, removed the guard there. It screws right off, and that way as I'm painting, the airbrush paint likes to dry on that little needle, so I just take my fingernails and pull the dried paint off as I'm working, and that will help keep it from slowing down and clogging and spitting weird flecks all over the place that you don't want. You do want to be careful though, because when you take this guard off, it's really easy to accidentally bend that needle, which will require you to replace the needle. I've done it many times. So when I'm done painting, I just put the guard back on there to help protect it. For those of you who are supporters over on Patreon, I do have a 1-hour version of this tutorial with a voiceover and everything available for you guys now, so make sure you check that out too. Anyway, on to the tutorial. I've started with a canvas that I painted green, and I'm using a very opaque white with a little bit of brown mixed in to start blocking in some of the lighter areas. This way my transparent paints, when I airbrush them over it, they'll stand out. So many of the airbrush paints are very, very transparent, so they're not going to show up very well against the green. I can be extremely messy at this point. I really just want to get a little bit more of the opaque colors in. I'm now coming through with the brown, and this is a dirt pathway, I guess. I don't know if there's bark or what it was back there in the reference photo. It's extremely blurry, so I can't tell. So I just need to kind of copy the feel and shape of that. Notice that most of my lines are kept fairly horizontal. The longer lines are horizontal, and this helps to keep the floor or the ground looking very flat. If I do a lot of vertical lines, it doesn't look like ground anymore, so it's really important to keep these going flat. I'm also not getting a lot of heavy detail in here. You don't want to get the airbrush so close that you're getting really fine detail with the harsh lines or harsh transitions in between each light and dark shadow or color. The closer you get the airbrush to the canvas, the finer detail and the harsher lines that you're going to get, which defeats the purpose of having a blurry background. However, in this case, I will go a little bit closer to the canvas as I get closer to the corgi where the foreground starts. In the background, I'm staying really, really far away from the canvas, or keeping the airbrush far away from the canvas, so that the lines do remain pretty harsh. I'm coming back through with a little bit of black mixed in with the brown to get some of the darker shadows in here. This isn't straight black though, because I don't want this to be too flat, so I have mixed brown in with it. When I airbrush my background on the paper that I'm going to use for colored pencil, I make sure that the edges of that paper are taped down. That way if the paper starts to warp from the moisture in the paint, it will dry back flat. As you can see, I am just layering on top of layering on top of layering here. I'm mostly using brown, a light tan, and black. If I go too dark with any of my values, like I have here on some of the ground, I want to pull some of the lighter browns back in, I use white, which is opaque, put that in first, and then I can put a layer of the lighter browns over it, and they'll show up really well. If I just try to use some of the transparent colors on top of some of the darker colors I had there, I'm not going to get the lighter areas in enough. Moving on to the grass, I'm again using the white because it's opaque. It'll show up really well against the dark green that I already have on there. And I'm keeping the airbrush still pretty far away from the canvas so that none of these lines are very harsh. Once I get all of these grass lines in, I can start coming back through with greens to make them the right color. But by using the opaque color first, it'll let the greens really pop out. Through with the greens, the colors that I'm using here are really bright and really fluorescent and actually make it look terrible, like I ruined everything, oh my gosh. But I need these colors to go on first because I'm going to end up using a more neutral reddish brown color over these, which will tone them down later. But for now, it kind of looks like a highlighter exploded on my canvas, and that's okay. These colors are very, very light, so they're very easy to go back over with the darker colors to tone them down. I'm now coming back through with some of the darker greens and starting to form these little grassy clumps better. You can see I'm not letting a ton of the fluorescent colors show through, but I'm not covering them up all the way either. By letting so many of these different colors show up, I end up building a lot more depth, which is the goal when using this technique. I've added a little bit of black in with my dark green, and now I'm coming through and getting the shadows. I'm also using a light yellow, which is just white with a little bit of a bright yellow mixed in with it to get some highlights in here. And the key for getting something like this is just layering on top of layering on top of layering. I probably spent, I'd say 3 hours on this background, maybe a little bit longer, to get everything just right, but it was just so many layers. Now I'm using white to put in where the flowers are going to go. Some of these flowers are going to be a kind of violet color, but in order to make them show up, I have to use white first because the violet is too transparent. So by putting white, that'll let the pink colors really show up. Again, even with those flowers, I don't want tons and tons of detail. I say detail, but really what I mean is I don't want the airbrush really, really close to the canvas so that I have harsh lines. I want these lines to be very, very soft. Now I can come back through with some color for those flowers, and I'm also using that reddish brown now to tone down a lot of the greens that I have in the grass so that they're not so fluorescent anymore. Layering the magenta onto those colors in the background. And the great thing about this, I said this already, you don't have to be good at the airbrush to make this look work. You can be a complete beginner, and because you're not trying to get detail, that's really generally the hardest part with airbrushing, is getting your fine detail. But we're not doing fine detail here. We want that airbrush far away. We want the look to be fuzzy and blurry, so that works out really well. Now, towards the very end of this, I'm just doing last final details and touch-ups. This is the part that just makes everything look really, really good. I like to put a lot of little dots here and there that give it kind of that sparkly feel when I do this type of background. But that's it. You can see it's very, very simple. It's just a matter of layering a whole lot. And then next week, I will show you the entire painting all together, which lets you really see the depth that you can get this way. Thanks for watching, guys. Again, if you are supporters over on Patreon, make sure to head over there where the 1-hour tutorial is available for you guys now. If you are new to my channel, I have new video critiques every Tuesday where I'm critiquing your original paintings or drawings, my own speed paintings, drawings, and tutorials every Wednesday, social media tips for artists each Thursday, and artist vlogs every weekend. So if you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe. And you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Google+, all of those social media sites. The links are below in the video description where you can keep up with news, my newest work, and see real-time clips of whatever it is I'm currently working on. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the social media vlog. Now my chair won't stop moving. Hi, I'm Lisa, the artist behind Lachri Fine Art, and that is not how to start that. Don't get too excited though. Every time I record these videos, I'm usually wearing sweats or pajama bottoms, but no one can tell on the video. The really special thing you can't see are my clownfish slippers. Yay, clownfishes. Totally forgot what I was talking about. I mean, obviously it was about painting, but yeah. Yep, that's it.